The scent of pine and rain-soaked earth filled my lungs as I huddled in the far corner of the great hall. My fingers traced the cold, rough stone wall, a harsh contrast against my skin, much like the weight of the stairs that pressed down on my shoulders. The pack gathering always left me feeling exposed, a pale moth among wolves. Tonight, it felt worse than ever. The full moon hung heavy outside its light, casting long shadows across the hall, while tensions ran high as alphas from neighboring territories filled the room. Their powerful scents made my head spin. "Weak blood," someone muttered, as I passed, and I kept my eyes low, letting my blonde hair fall forward to shield my face. They weren't wrong. In a world where strength was everything, I was the anomaly. An omega born into the central pack, a place where warriors were revered and softness was considered nothing more than a flaw. The silver pendant around my neck caught the firelight, blinding me with its reflection. My mother's last gift before the fever took her. "Gentleness has its own power," she'd whispered, closing my fingers around it. "Remember that when the world tries to convince you otherwise." I touched it now, a ritual that brought calm, but the weight of my place in this world became too much to bear. Kor's voice boomed across the hall, silencing the murmurs and clinking glasses. His massive figure demanded attention as his dark eyes swept across his subjects. Even from my corner, I could feel his power, the authority of the Alpha King. "We welcome our northern allies," he announced, gesturing to the stern-faced visitors. "Together we will address the encroachment on our eastern borders." But just as his words filled the air, a piercing cry cut through them. It was so agonizing that it froze my blood in my veins. Kor's face instantly transformed, the mask of authority dropping to reveal a raw fear I had never seen on him. The room erupted in chaos as he dropped everything, tearing through the crowd toward the royal quarters. The visiting alphas exchanged glances, some concerned, others calculating. I pressed deeper into the shadows, trying to remain invisible as I always did. That's when Mira, the pack healer, grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into me with unexpected strength. "Come with me, Willa," she said, her voice leaving no room for refusal. "I don't understand," I whispered, but she was already pulling me through the crowd, past warriors and nobles, who would normally never spare me a glance. Whispers followed us, growing more confused with each step. What could the Alpha King possibly want with the pack's weakest omega? Mira's grip tightened as we approached the royal wing, an area forbidden to anyone of my rank. Two massive guards blocked our path. Their eyes narrowed at my presence. "The king requested her," Mira stated firmly, and to my shock they stepped aside. The nursery was warm and luxurious tapestries, depicting the pack's history adorning the walls, but the beauty was overshadowed by the scent of distress, primal alpha distress that made my knees weak. Kor knelt beside an ornate cradle. His enormous frame seemed smaller in the face of worry. 3 healers surrounded him, their expressions grim, and in the cradle lay a tiny infant. No older than a few weeks, his little face contorted in agony. His cries had weakened to soft whimpers, which somehow seemed worse. Even with my limited knowledge, I could sense something was terribly wrong. His scent carried sickness, something wrong that didn't belong in one so young. "Nothing is working," one healer murmured. "The fever won't break, and he refuses milk from any wet nurse we've brought." Kor looked up, and for the first time in my life, his eyes fixed directly on mine. The raw vulnerability in them shocked me more than being summoned to the royal quarters. "You," he said quietly, but there was no mistaking the command in his voice. "Mira believes you can help." I glanced at Mira in confusion, but her face revealed nothing. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I'm not a healer. I have no skills that could help." "It's not about skill," Mira interrupted. "It's about what you are." Kor's voice was quiet, but firm as he rose to his full height, towering over me. "My son is dying." He's rejected every wet nurse from our pack and the visiting territories. Mira believes. She believes an Omega might succeed where others have failed. The weight of his words sank in slowly. I wasn't here for any special talent or knowledge. I was here because I was the weakest link, a last desperate attempt. When all other solutions had failed, please. The words seemed to physically hurt him to utter. Nurse my pup. The room fell silent, every eye on me, my cheeks flushed with a mix of humiliation and confusion. I had never nursed a child before. I had no children of my own. What was he asking of me? Mira stepped forward, sensing my confusion. It's not about milk, child. The heir needs comfort that an Alpha or Beta cannot provide. He needs the calming scent of an Omega. But surely there were others. You're the only unmated Omega of childbearing age in the central pack. Kor's voice was hollow as he spoke. The others are all bound to mates whose sense would interfere. I glanced down at the tiny heir, his chest rising and falling too quickly, his suffering clear in the way his body tensed. Whatever pride I might have clung to it crumbled in that moment. I nodded once, stepping forward. I'll try, I whispered through doubt gnawed at me. The healers parted reluctantly, their doubt written clearly on their faces. I walked toward the cradle, acutely aware of Kor's intense gaze following my every move. Gently I reached down and lifted the baby prince. He was lighter than I expected, burning with fever. I cradled him close to my chest, one hand supporting his fragile head, and moved to the rocking chair by the window. The moonlight bathed the room in silver as I settled in, holding the heir to the most powerful Alpha in the territory. Shh, I murmured, rocking slowly. You're safe now, little one. At first nothing changed. The baby continued to whimper, his small body stiff against mine. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the pressure of everyone watching, judging, expecting me to fail. Instead, I focused on my breathing, slow and deep. Just like my mother had taught me when the overwhelming sense and emotions of the pack became too much. An Omega's greatest strength, she'd said, was in bringing calm to chaos. I hummed softly an old lullaby she used to sing to me. The silver pendant resting between me and the baby, warming against our skin, helped steady my hand. Minutes passed in heavy silence. Then so gradually, I almost missed it. I felt the baby's rigid body begin to relax. His breathing slowed, syncing with mine, the sharp scent of distress fading, slightly replaced by something softer. I opened my eyes to find Kor staring at us, in disbelief. The baby had stopped crying entirely. His tiny hands uncurled from tight fists, resting gently against my collarbone. One of the healers whispered, her fingers brushing the infant's forehead. His fever, it's dropping. A wave of relief flooded the room, a collective exhale that seemed to shake the walls. But beneath it, I could sense something else from Kor. A complex emotion I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes, but also confusion. And maybe a trace of resentment that someone like me had succeeded where the skilled healers had failed. What is your name, Mama? He asked, though I knew he'd already been told. Willa, I answered softly, still rocking the now peaceful air. Willa, he repeated as if testing the sound of it. It seems my son finds comfort in your presence. You will stay with him tonight, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It wasn't a request. Yes, Alpha, I murmured, lowering my gaze as was proper. He lingered a moment longer, his expression unreadable, before turning to the healers with renewed authority. Prepare a room adjoining the nursery. Willa will remain close to the heir until he's fully recovered. The implications of his command rippled through the room. I would be moved from my small quarters at the edge of the territory to the royal wing, an unprecedented elevation for someone of my rank. The healers exchanged glances, but no one dared question their Alpha. As they hurried to obey, Kor paused at the door, his piercing gaze locking onto mine. If he survives the night, he said quietly, the pack will owe you a debt. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the sleeping prince and the weight of an impossible responsibility. I looked down at the tiny face, peaceful now, against my chest, and felt a stirring of protectiveness that surprised me. This child had no concept of rank or status. He knew only comfort and distress. And somehow, against all odds, he had found the former in me. Outside clouds drifted across the moon, casting deeper shadows in the room. The pack gathering would conclude without its host, and rumors would spread like wildfire. By morning, everyone would know that the weakest Omega had been summoned to the Alpha King's inner sanctum, and what that might mean for the delicate hierarchy that governed our lives. I settled deeper into the chair, preparing for a long night. Whatever came next, I knew with certainty my life would never be the same. The moment I stepped into the royal quarters, I had crossed into a dangerous new world. A world where I could either be elevated or destroyed, with very little chance of returning to the quiet, invisible life I had known before. The baby sighed in his sleep, his tiny hand curling around my finger with surprising strength. In that moment, rank and pack politics seemed distant, meaningless. I had been tasked with protecting this child, and I would do so with every ounce of strength I had, no matter the cost. What I couldn't yet grasp was how far those costs would stretch, or just how deeply they would change not only my life, but the entire pack's future. As the night pressed on, I rocked the air, the future Alpha in my arms, waiting for whatever dawn would bring. When morning finally came, the golden light streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air like forgotten dreams. I blinked awake, disoriented by the sheer opulence of my surroundings, the silk cushions, the ornate furniture, the vast space of the room. For someone who had spent her life in cramped quarters, sharing space with 3 other Omegas, the royal nursery felt like an entirely different world. The baby slept peacefully against my chest. His fever had broken sometime during the night. I had drifted off in the rocking chair, too afraid to move him to the small cot that had been set up for me, worried I might disturb his fragile rest. My body ached from the uncomfortable position, but I didn't dare shift, fearing I'd wake him. His tiny face had relaxed, the fever leaving a faint flush on his cheeks. I studied him in the soft light, the strong brow, the jawline that echoed his father's even in sleep. He was so small, but even now his alpha blood was clear. But there was also a tenderness, a vulnerability that tugged deep within me. The door opened quietly, and I tensed, expecting Core. Instead, a woman entered, tall, graceful, with the undeniable presence of high rank. The queen consort. I had seen her at ceremonies, but never this close. Her beauty was striking, with high cheekbones and sharp, intense eyes. But there was a coldness to her perfection, a distance that made me instinctively recoil. She spoke, her voice calm but controlled. "You're the Omega who calmed my son." I lowered my gaze respectfully. "The fever broke in the night, Your Highness. He's been sleeping peacefully." She approached each step, slow and deliberate. I fought the instinct to curl protectively around the baby, reminding myself that she was his mother and she had every right to him. More right than I ever would. "May I?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. I nodded, carefully transferring the still sleeping prince into her waiting arms. He stirred at the change, his little face scrunching in displeasure. For a moment I feared he would start crying again, rejecting her like he had with the other wet nurses. The queen consort seemed to share the same concern. I saw a flash of panic cross her features before the baby settled, too exhausted from his ordeal to protest. Relief softened her face for just a moment before her regal composure returned. "The Alpha King has decreed that you will remain as my son's nurse until he is fully recovered," she said. Her tone made it clear this wasn't her decision. "You will be given quarters adjoining the nursery and appropriate attire. Your duties in the pack will be reassigned." She made it sound as if I had been elevated to some position of importance, but in reality, my daily tasks had been menial, mending clothes, tending to the communal garden, all deemed suitable for Omegas. Nothing that couldn't be easily reassigned. "Yes, Your Highness," I murmured, uncertain of what else to say. She studied me closely, and I fidgeted under her gaze. "You have no mate?" she asked, her voice cold and sharp. "No, Your Highness." "Family?" She probed further. I swallowed, trying to calm the tightness in my throat. "None living, Your Highness." Something flickered in her eyes, calculation or perhaps pity. "That simplifies matters. You will take your meals here and leave the royal wing only when permitted. The heir's condition is not to be discussed with anyone outside this room. Understood?" I nodded, though her restrictions confused me. Surely the entire pack already knew about the prince's illness and my strange role in his recovery. "The walls have ears," my mother used to say. As if reading my thoughts, the queen's mouth tightened. The Alpha King's enemies would consider a sickly heir a sign of weakness. We cannot afford such perceptions, especially with the border disputes growing. Political concerns, of course. I had been naive, thinking this was only about a child's health. Everything in pack life always circled back to power and dominance. The baby began to fuss in her arms, his tiny fists waving in distress. A flicker of frustration crossed the queen's face before she handed him back to me with practiced ease. The moment he settled against my chest, his distress eased. His breathing, slowing, his scent, shifting to something sweet. The queen watched this transformation with an unreadable expression. "Curious," she murmured, almost to herself. "Mira mentioned something about scent compatibility, but I didn't think—" She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders, regaining her composure. "A servant will bring your belongings and guide you to your new quarters. The healers will visit regularly. If his condition changes in any way, you are to notify us immediately." With those words, she swept out of the room, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive perfume and something sharper beneath it. Anxiety, perhaps, or resentment. I couldn't blame her. What mother wouldn't feel displaced by a stranger who could soothe her child when she could not? The rest of the day passed in a blur of adjustments. Servants brought my few belongings, 2 simple dresses, a worn brush. My mother's book of herbal remedies, and showed me to a small, yet luxurious room that was connected to the nursery by a short passage. I was given new clothes made of finer materials than I had ever worn, soft linens that didn't scratch against my skin. Food appeared at regular intervals, more than I would typically eat in 2 days. Through it all, I kept the baby close, fascinated by his shifting expressions and the strength in his tiny grip whenever he clutched my finger. He had started taking milk from a wet nurse now, though he calmed best when I held him afterward. The healers came and went, examining him with increasing optimism. "A miracle," one whispered when she thought I couldn't hear. "We thought we were going to lose him," another healer had said. By evening, word had spread through the royal household. Servants who had never spared me a glance now eyed me with curiosity. Some with wonder, others with suspicion. I overheard fragments of their whispered conversations as they passed the nursery. "Just an omega. How could she?" one said. I heard the Alpha King himself pleaded with her. "Unnatural, if you ask me. There must be some trick." I pretended not to hear, focusing instead on the child in my arms. Let them talk. It changed nothing about who I was or where I belonged. Once the child was fully recovered, I would return to my life before all this. This strange interlude would become nothing more than a curious story told around evening fires. As twilight deepened outside the tall windows, the door opened again. This time it was Kor who entered, his powerful figure filling the doorway. He looked less haggard than the night before, though weariness still shadowed his eyes. "Alpha King," I acknowledged, rising carefully with the baby still in my arms. He crossed the room with the grace of a predator. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair I had just vacated. "You must be tired." I sank back down, surprised by his consideration. Kor rarely concerned himself with the comfort of those beneath him, which in this case was essentially everyone. "How is he?" Kor asked, his gaze on his son, not me. "Much improved." Alpha, I replied softly. The fever hasn't returned and he's taking milk now. The healers believe the worst has passed. Relief softened Kor's stern features for a moment. He reached out one large hand, hovering over his son's head. The contrast was striking those powerful fingers that could snap bone, now gentle as they stroked the baby's cheek. You've done well, Kor's deep voice rumbled quietly in the room. The pack owes you a debt. I lowered my eyes. I've done nothing special, Alpha. Any Omega would have. Kor interrupted, his voice firm. No, he continued. Mira tried 3 other Omegas before you, mated ones with their own pups. None had the effect you did. The words took me by surprise. I looked up at him momentarily, forgetting my place. I don't understand, I said softly. Kor's dark eyes locked with mine, and I fought the urge to look away. There was something unsettling about being the center of his full attention. It felt like standing too close to fire. Neither do I, he admitted, his tone unexpectedly honest. Mira has theories. Something about your particular scent being compatible with my son's. It calms him in ways no one else can. The implication sent an uncomfortable shiver through me. Scent compatibility was usually discussed in terms of mating, not caring for pups. I didn't know how to respond to that, though the discomfort in my chest was palpable. Kor seemed to sense it. It doesn't matter why, he continued. Only that it works. My son will live because of you, Willa. I don't forget such things. He said my name with a strange emphasis that sent a shiver down my spine. Recognition from the Alpha King was a dangerous gift. It made one visible in a court where invisibility was often the safest choice. There will be a ceremony tomorrow, he said, abruptly changing the subject. We'll present my son to the pack and announce his recovery. You will attend. My heart skipped a beat. Alpha? I whispered, my voice trembling. It wasn't a request. His tone remained even, but there was an underlying steel I could not ignore. The pack should know who saved their future, Alpha. It will elevate your position. Elevation was the last thing I ever wanted. Higher positions meant higher expectations. More eyes on me, more opportunities to fail. I had survived all these years by staying in the shadows, remaining invisible, unnoticed, forgotten. This sudden thrust into the spotlight terrified me more than Kor's imposing presence ever could. What if he falls ill again? I asked, clutching at the most practical concern. Kor's expression darkened. That's why you'll stay as his nurse for the foreseeable future. Your quarters are ready. You'll have everything you need. For how long? The question slipped from my lips before I could stop it. His gaze sharpened. Until I determine your services are no longer required. That could be days, weeks, or months. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the anxiety creeping in my stomach. My entire world had been turned upside down in less than a day. All my routines, my modest comfort stripped away. The luxury surrounding me was nothing compared to the simple freedoms I had once taken for granted. Sensing my distress, the baby began to fuss. Kor frowned, stepping back. You're upsetting him. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm. The moment I did, the air responded, his scent sweetening as he settled back into sleep. Kor watched the interaction with what could only be described as fascination. Remarkable, he murmured. Then more decisively he said, rest tonight. The ceremony will be at midday. With that, he turned to leave, pausing at the door. I've arranged for new clothes to be delivered in the morning, something appropriate for the occasion. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, rocking the sleeping prince, and trying to make sense of this new life I was now a part of. Beyond the windows, I could see torches being lit in the courtyard, guards changing shifts. Somewhere in the pack, my fellow Omegas would be gathering for the evening meal, no doubt wondering what had happened to me. Did they envy my sudden rise in status, or pity it? I wasn't sure which response I preferred. The baby sighed in his sleep, one tiny hand curled around my collarbone. Despite everything, a surge of protectiveness washed over me. Whatever complications my new position brought, this child was innocent in all of it. He needed me in a way that defied pack politics and hierarchy. As I laid him in his cradle for the night, my mother's pendant caught the moonlight. Gentleness has its own power, I whispered her words, becoming my own. Maybe that's what she had meant all along. Strength doesn't always come from dominance. Sometimes it's the quiet power to bring peace when none exists. I touched the sleeping heir's cheek once more, before retreating to my new quarters, wondering what the ceremony would bring and how it would change my life yet again. One thing was certain: there was no going back to the shadows. For better or worse, I had stepped into the light. The morning arrived in a flurry of activity. Servants bustled in and out of my quarters, bringing an elaborate gown of silver blue silk that whispered against my skin when I tried it on. It was finer than anything I had ever worn, delicate embroidery along the sleeves, and neckline symbols of the royal house woven subtly into the pattern marking my new, undefined role. A young beta woman was assigned to help me prepare, brushing my pale blonde hair until it shone like moonlight, arranging it in a simple, elegant style that framed my face. When I looked in the polished mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. This couldn't be me. This creature with wide eyes, flushed cheeks, and draped in finery. "You look beautiful," the beta said, genuine surprise in her voice. "Who would have thought—" She didn't finish her sentence, but didn't need to. Who would have thought a plain Omega could clean up so well? I wasn't offended. I'd thought the same thing myself. The baby was taken temporarily by Mira while I prepared. Though his absence left me anxious, I had grown accustomed to the weight of him in my arms, his scent mingling with mine. When he was returned to me, dressed in ceremonial clothes that matched the royal colors, he fussed until I held him close. His tiny face nuzzled against my neck as if seeking reassurance. "He's bonded to you already." Mira observed, her weathered face thoughtful. "It's unusual for it to happen so quickly, especially with someone who's not blood-related. Is that concerning?" I asked, suddenly worried. I had done something wrong. She shook her head. "It's a blessing, child. The heir needs stability, and you provide it. The Alpha King understands this," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "But be prepared. Not everyone will welcome your elevation." Before I could ask what she meant, a servant appeared at the door. "It's time," he announced, his tone carrying urgency. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the Great Hall." My heart fluttered in my chest as if caged, while Mira gave my arm a reassuring squeeze before she left, leaving me to follow the servant through the royal wing's winding corridors. The baby Ash was calm in my arms, unaware of the significance of what was about to unfold. The Great Hall looked different in the daylight, less intimidating, but far more imposing. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating the ancient tapestries that chronicled our pack's long history. The entire Central Pack had gathered along with dignitaries from surrounding territories. The crowd parted as I made my way down the long aisle toward the dais, where Kor stood, his powerful frame draped in ceremonial leathers and furs that emphasized his authority as the Alpha King. Beside him stood Selene the Queen, consort, regal in crimson and gold. Her face was a perfect mask, revealing nothing of her thoughts. As I approached, I kept my eyes lowered, the weight of the hundreds of gazes on me heavy. Some curious, others suspicious, and a few openly hostile. "Willa of the Central Pack," Kor announced, his voice carrying through the hall. "Approach." I moved carefully up the steps, mindful of the precious bundle in my arms. When I reached the top, I finally looked up. Kor's intense gaze met mine, something flickering in his dark eyes. Approval maybe, or something deeper, something more complicated. "3 nights ago," Kor's voice boomed across the hall, "my son and heir hovered between life and death. Our most skilled healers could do nothing. In desperation, we turned to one among us who possesses a rare gift, a natural ability to calm and heal through her omega essence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I fought the urge to shrink back to hide behind my hair, as I had always done when attention turned my way. Willa Kor continued, has shown us that true strength comes in many forms. Through her care, my son has been restored to health. He turned to me, then extending his hands. Reluctantly, I placed the baby in his father's arms. Ash stirred, but didn't cry, his scent remaining sweet and calm as Kor held him. He lifted the baby high, presenting him to the pack. Behold riven heir to the central territory, strong and whole. And the hall erupted in cheers, the sound crashing over me like a physical force. I stood awkwardly, unsure of my place now that the announcement had been made. Was I dismissed? Should I step back? But Kor wasn't finished. As the cheers faded, he handed the baby back to Celine and turned to face me once more. For your service to the royal line and the pack, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, I name you guardian of the heir. You will remain at court with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. Shocked silence fell over the hall. Guardian of the heir, the position was traditionally reserved for high-ranking betas or trusted alphas and never for an omega. The weight of my new role settled over me, placing me under the royal family's protection in a way that was unheard of. It was an elevation no one could have predicted. Celine's expression remained neutral, though I saw the slight tightening of her jaw. This hadn't been her idea. Cade Kor instructed, his voice sharp, and I sank to my knees, head bowed. Kor placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, and I felt something cold and metallic drape around my neck. I looked down to see an ornate silver chain bearing the royal crest, the official symbol of my new position. Rise, Guardian, he commanded, and I did, feeling lightheaded from the weight of my sudden elevation. The crowd's response was mixed. Some applauded politely, while others exchanged worried glances. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a group of high-ranking alphas watching with open disdain. Among them was Jax, the captain of the Royal Guard, whose dark gaze bored into me with unmistakable contempt. As the formal part of the ceremony ended, the gathering shifted into a celebration. Food and drink were served, music played, and conversations resumed. I found myself isolated on the dais, with Celine moving to speak with visiting dignitaries, taking Ash with her. Kor was surrounded by advisors deep in discussion. I stood alone, unsure of what to do or where to go in this new role I had been thrust into. The royal crest felt heavy against my chest, a constant reminder of how quickly life could change. Yesterday I had been invisible. Today I stood beside the Alpha King, marked as someone of importance. It was an elevation that both thrilled and terrified me. The smooth voice of a guard nearby remarked, "Quite the elevation." I turned to find Jax standing beside me, his tall frame radiating tension despite his casual stance. As captain of the Royal Guard, he was one of the few alphas who could approach me now that I held a court position, no formal introduction necessary. "I didn't seek this," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. His lip curled slightly. Few would believe that. An unmated omega suddenly placed at the heart of the royal household, many would consider it strategic. He added his words sharp. The implication stung. "I only wanted to help the child," I insisted, my voice soft but firm. "Noble," he replied, sarcasm thick in his tone. "And now you've been rewarded beyond your station. Tell me, Guardian, how will you protect the heir when you yourself need protection? An omega with no fighting skills, no strategic training, no political acumen." Before I could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Perhaps those qualities are precisely why she was chosen captain." Mira approached her age and experience, giving her the authority to speak where others couldn't. "The heir needs more than physical protection," she continued. "He needs stability, comfort, a gentle influence to balance the warrior training he will receive," she added, her voice steady and confident. Jax's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. With all due respect, healer and heir raised with too much omega influence risks becoming weak. and one raised with only Alpha influence risks becoming cruel. Mira countered smoothly. Balance. Captain, the Alpha King understands this even if others do not. Jax looked as if he wanted to argue further, but a sharp glance from Cor across the room silenced whatever retort he'd been forming. With a stiff nod to Mira and one last measuring look at me, Jax withdrew. You've made an enemy, Mira observed once he was out of earshot. Unfortunately, not your last, she added. This position places you in dangerous waters, child. I never wanted this. I whispered, the weight of my new reality settling heavily on my shoulders. Her weathered hand gently patted mine. Yet here you are. The question is, what will you do with it? Before I could ask what she meant, a commotion near the entrance caught our attention. A messenger had arrived, breathless and urgent. He spoke rapidly to the guards, who immediately escorted him to Cor. The Alpha King's expression darkened as he listened, his powerful frame tensing visibly. The festive mood evaporated as Cor raised a hand for silence. There has been an attack on our northern border, he announced, his voice grave. 3 of our patrols were ambushed. There are casualties. Gasps and murmurs swept through the hall. Border skirmishes were not uncommon, but coordinated attacks on multiple patrols suggested something far more organized, more dangerous. The council will convene immediately. Cor continued. Captain Jax, prepare your forces. We ride at dawn. As the hall erupted into activity, the queen consort approached me, Ash still in her arms. Take him to the nursery, she instructed, her voice taut with controlled fear. Do not leave the royal wing until further notice. If there's trouble. She hesitated, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. The reluctance to place her child's safety in my hands balanced against the undeniable fact that the baby was most content with me. I'll protect him with my life, I promised, meaning every word. Something in my tone must have convinced her. She nodded once, transferring Ash to my arms. Go now, she said. The royal wing will be sealed and guarded. As I hurried through the corridors, holding the prince close, I could feel the pack's anxiety hanging in the air like a thick fog. Servants rushed about, their faces tense. Guards doubled at every entrance. Beneath it all, the unmistakable scent of fear lingered. Border attacks meant war, and war meant death. Even though I'd been sheltered from the horrors of past conflicts, I knew the stories, the losses, the grief, the orphaned pups. In the nursery, I locked the doors and windows as instructed, drawing heavy curtains across the glass. Ash, sensing my unease, began to fuss. I forced myself to calm, knowing my scent would affect him. It's all right, little one, I murmured, rocking him gently. Your father will protect us all. Night fell without any word of the battle. I remained in the nursery, tending to Ash's needs, listening to the distant sounds of activity in the courtyard below, horses, weapons, preparations for war. Twice I heard raised voices from the council chamber down the hall. Though I couldn't make out the words, Ash finally fell asleep. Exhausted from the excitement of the day, I placed him in his cradle, my new pendant catching the candlelight as I leaned over him. Guardian of the Air. The title felt hollow now in the face of real danger. What could I, a mere Omega, do if enemies breached the castle walls? How could I protect this child with nothing but my weak limbs and gentle nature? My mother's voice seemed to whisper from memory. Gentleness has its own power. Gentleness has its own power. I touched the silver pendant she had given me, drawing strength from the memory of her. Whatever happened in the coming days, I would find a way to live up to my new role, not because the Alpha King had commanded it, but because this child, innocent of politics and power struggles, deserved a protector who saw him as more than just the future Alpha. A soft knock at the door startled me. Who's there? I called, instinctively positioning myself between the cradle and the entrance. Dominic, came the reply. Open the door, Willa. I hurried to unlock the door, my heart racing as Cor entered the nursery. He looked different now, his formal attire replaced by practical leathers, a sword hanging at his side. His face was grim, hardened by the weight of command. "The heir?" he asked immediately. "Sleeping peacefully," I replied, gesturing to the cradle. Cor moved silently to his son's side, his eyes scanning the tiny form in the crib. I couldn't quite read his expression, pride mixed with fear, perhaps. Even that the mightiest Alpha couldn't protect his child from every danger, especially when duty called him away. "I leave at first light," he said, his voice low to avoid waking Ash. "The border attacks were coordinated. Our intelligence suggests the Eastern Alliance is testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses." I remained silent, unsure why he was sharing this information with me. Military matters were far outside my realm of knowledge or influence. "The Queen will assume regency in my absence," Cor continued. "But her focus must be on diplomacy and maintaining order within the pack." He paused, turning to face me directly. "The heir. His safety is your responsibility now." The weight of his words settled like a stone in my stomach. "Alpha, I'm not trained for this." "Surely Jax or one of your guards would be better," I added, though the words felt hollow. "Jax comes with me," Cor interrupted. "As for the guards, they will protect the castle walls. But inside—" He paused, his expression hardening. "War brings opportunity for those with ambition. Not all threats come from outside. Court intrigue, internal politics." The realization made me feel cold, like a sudden winter chill. An absent Alpha King, a vulnerable heir. Some might see it as the perfect time to shift power. "I don't understand politics," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't recognize a threat until it's too late." "You don't need to understand politics," Cor said firmly. "You only need to do what comes naturally to you. Stay close to my son. Observe who approaches him, how he responds to them. Your instincts as his guardian will guide you. And if someone challenges my authority—" I swallowed hard. "I have no power to stop them. You have my power," Cor replied, touching the royal crest that hung from my neck. "This marks you as acting with my voice in matters concerning the heir. Anyone who defies you, defies me." The weight of the pendant seemed to grow heavier, a tangible reminder of the responsibility thrust upon me. I swallowed again, searching for the courage I wasn't sure I had. "How long will you be gone?" I asked softly, my voice trembling. Cor's dark eyes flickered in surprise, maybe at my directness. "As long as necessary," he replied, his voice quiet but resolute. "Weeks, possibly months." Months. The word echoed in my mind, stretching this strange new life into an uncertain future. Cor moved to the window, pushing the curtain aside to gaze out at the moonlit courtyard where his warriors prepared for departure. His powerful silhouette was framed by the night sky shoulders, weighed down with the burden of his survival pack. "There's something else you should know," he said without turning. "The heir's illness was not natural." My heart skipped a beat. Shock rendered me momentarily speechless. Mira found traces of wolf's bane in his system. I managed to speak, my voice barely a whisper. "Someone tried to poison him." "It appears so," Cor said, his voice controlled, but the simmering rage beneath the surface unmistakable. Few had access to him. "We're investigating, but my departure complicates matters." "Does the Queen know?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Yes. She has her own guards she trusts implicitly, but she cannot be with our son at all times given her regency duties." He turned back to face me, his gaze intense. "This is why you were chosen, Willa. Beyond your calming effect on him, you have no political alliances, no ambitious family seeking to use you for their own gain. Your loyalty is solely to the child." The realization settled deep within me, both flattering and terrifying. My isolation, the very thing that had kept me invisible, unimportant, and inconsequential in the pack hierarchy, had now made me valuable. I had no divided loyalties, No one to please but the innocent child in my care. I won't fail him, I promised, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Cor studied me as if seeing me for the first time. No, he said, his voice firm. I don't believe you will. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. There's a passage behind the north tapestry, he said quietly. It leads to a hidden chamber, then to an exit beyond the castle walls. Memorize the route. If danger comes and you cannot face it, take my son and go. I stood frozen, the weight of his words sinking in. Head west toward the river territories. My allies there will shelter you. The thought of fleeing with Ash terrified me, but I nodded. I pray it doesn't come to that, Cor said, his voice softer now. As do I. His hand rested briefly on the hilt of his sword, and he added, but hope is a poor substitute for preparation. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with the sleeping prince and a new understanding of the dangerous game I had unwittingly entered. Dawn arrived with the sounds of departure horses' armor, the low rumble of warriors gathering in the courtyard. I stood at the window, Ash cradled in my arms, watching as Cor mounted his great black stallion. The Alpha King looked up, his eyes finding mine across the distance. For a brief moment, our gazes locked, before he turned away, leading his forces through the castle gates and into the uncertain future that awaited them. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. I rarely left the royal wing, dividing my time between caring for Ash and learning the layout of the castle. Under the guise of taking him for walks in the castle gardens, I familiarized myself with every corridor, every possible escape route. The hidden passage Cor had mentioned became my focal point. I visited it daily, ensuring the mechanism still worked and that the path remained clear. Celine the Queen, consort, remained distant, consumed by her regency duties. She visited Ash briefly each day, her interactions with me polite but formal. I sensed her inner conflict, gratitude for the care I gave to Ash and a quiet resentment of the bond that seemed to strengthen between us with each passing day. As weeks passed, Ash grew stronger. His eyes, dark like Cor's, began to focus on my face when I spoke to him. His tiny fingers would curl around my pendant or my hair, his grip surprisingly strong. I found myself talking to him constantly, telling him stories of the outside world, singing the old songs my mother had taught me. "You're good with him," Mira observed during one of her regular visits to check on Ash's health. Some would say, too good. I looked up from where I sat by the window, Ash sleeping peacefully in my arms. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice soft. Mira's eyes, kind yet filled with concern, met mine. "There are whispers, child. Some question why an Omega has such influence over the future Alpha. They fear you'll make him soft." "He's just a baby," I protested. "Not even 3 months old." "Character forms early," Mira replied, "especially for Alphas. Their nature begins to manifest even before they can walk." She hesitated before adding, "The Queen's circle of advisors has suggested bringing in a beta nursemaid to share your duties. Someone with appropriate values." A surge of protectiveness filled me, surprising me with its intensity. "The Alpha King named me his guardian," I said firmly. "Only he can change that." Mira nodded, a small smile of approval warming her weathered features. "Good. You'll need that strength in the days ahead." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful who you trust, Willa. The palace has been different since Cor left. New alliances are forming. Old loyalties are being tested." I thought of the various nobles and officials who had begun to visit the nursery, ostensibly to pay respects to Ash, but clearly assessing me as well. Most were polite, though condescending, treating me as a curiosity rather than a threat. But a few watched with calculating eyes, their stares making my skin crawl. "Has there been any word from the border?" I asked, changing the subject. Mira's expression grew somber, and I saw a flicker of worry cross her face. The fighting continued. The Eastern Alliance was better prepared than anyone had anticipated. Corps had sent for reinforcements from the Northern Territories, which meant he wouldn't be returning anytime soon. I tried to ignore the hollow feeling that news stirred inside me. My focus needed to stay on Ash and his safety, not on when his father might return. That night a storm rolled in from the mountains, thunder shaking the castle walls as rain lashed against the windows. Ash was restless, sensing the disturbance in the air. I walked the nursery floor with him, humming softly to calm his whimpers. A sharp knock at the door made me tense. It was well past midnight, far too late for regular visitors. "Who is it?" I called instinctively, moving toward the tapestry that concealed the hidden passage. "A message from the Queen," came the reply. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. I hesitated, suspicion warring with protocol. The Queen's messengers always had access, but something about this felt off. "Slide it under the door," I suggested. "The heir is finally asleep." A brief pause. Then the message is verbal, guardian. It concerns the Alpha King's latest dispatch. News of Corps. The temptation to open the door was strong, but I remembered his warning. "Return in the morning," I said firmly. "I won't disturb the prince now." Another pause, longer this time. Then the sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, clutching Ash closer. Had I overreacted, maybe? But something about the timing, the insistence on entry, triggered an instinctive wariness. The next morning I asked the Queen's actual handmaiden if any message had been sent to me during the night. "No, guardian," she replied, looking puzzled. Her Majesty retired early and gave no such instructions. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had tried to gain access to the nursery under false pretenses. I reported the incident to the head of the royal guard, who remained at the castle, a gruff beta named Kyle, who had served the royal family for decades. "You did right to refuse entry," Kale said after hearing my account. "I'll double the guards on the royal wing and investigate who might have attempted this." But his investigation led to nothing. Whoever had come to my door that night had vanished like smoke, leaving only my unease behind. In the weeks that followed, I became hypervigilant, scrutinizing everyone who approached the nursery. The Queen, sensing my concerns, arranged for additional guards, though I couldn't be sure whether this was for Ash's protection or to keep an eye on me. Summer faded into autumn, and news from the borders painted a grim picture. Corps had pushed back the Eastern Alliance, but at great cost. Wounded warriors returned with tales of fierce battles and heavy losses. The mood in the castle grew tense as resources dwindled and families mourned their fallen. Through it all, Ash thrived, seemingly unaware of the world around him. He began to attempt, rolling over his little brow furrowed in determination. When he finally succeeded, his delighted gurgle brought tears to my eyes. "Look at you," I whispered, kneeling beside him on the thick carpet. "So strong already. As a future Alpha should be." A voice from the doorway interrupted me. I looked up to see Celine, her expression a complex mix of pride and something else, wistfulness perhaps, or regret. "Your Majesty," I acknowledged, rising quickly. "I didn't hear you enter." She moved into the room with her characteristic grace, kneeling beside her son in a rare moment of informality. Ash grinned up at her, flailing his arms excitedly. "He grows more like his father every day," she observed, allowing him to grasp her finger. "The same determination, the same focus." "Yes," I agreed, seeing the resemblance myself. "There'll be a strong leader one day." The Queen turned to look at me, then her gaze sharp. "If he lives to see that day." Before I could respond to that alarming statement, she continued. "There was another attempt last night. A guard caught someone trying to enter the royal wing through a servant's passage. They escaped but left this behind." From her pocket she withdrew a small vial filled with dark liquid. My blood ran cold even from a distance. I recognized the unmistakable scent of wolf's bane. "The attempts are growing bolder," she said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "We cannot remain here much longer. It's becoming too dangerous." "What do you mean?" "We can't remain here," I asked. My arms instinctively moving to gather ash from the floor. The baby sensed my tension immediately, his small face scrunching in concern. The queen rose gracefully, brushing invisible dust from her gown. "I've received intelligence." She began, her voice calm but firm, "that suggests a coordinated attack on the castle may be imminent. Not from outside forces, but from within. A faction that sees Kor's absence as an opportunity. A coup." The word felt foreign and dangerous as it left my mouth. She nodded grimly, her expression hardening. "They seek to control my son, to rule through him, as protectors until he comes of age, and conveniently, they would be the ones to decide when that day comes." "But you're the Queen Regent," I interjected. "Surely your authority is contested by those who believe an Alpha should rule even in Kor's absence." For a brief moment, her composure slipped, and I saw the flicker of fear beneath the surface. "They question my decisions daily, undermine my orders. The longer Kor stays at the border, the bolder they become." I clutched Ash tighter, my mind racing. "What can we do?" "We must remove the heir from the castle." She said, her words deliberate and measured. "Tonight." The weight of her plan settled over me like a heavy cloak. "I've arranged a small escort of loyal guards. You'll take Ash to the summer palace in the western foothills." I stared at her in surprise. "It's remote, defensible, and known to few. Wouldn't it be safer for you to go with him?" I asked, my voice uncertain. Celine's smile was bitter. "If I disappear, they'll know immediately what has happened. I must remain to maintain the illusion that nothing has changed, to buy you time to reach safety." She reached out, touching Ash's cheek with rare tenderness. "Besides, he needs your scent, your comfort, especially during a journey that will be difficult for one so young." The reality of what she was asking settled heavily in my chest. Taking Ash from the only home he had known, traveling through potentially dangerous territory, all while carrying the future of the pack on my shoulders. "I've never left the territory," I admitted. "I don't know how to—" "You won't be alone," Selena interrupted. "Kyle will lead the escort. He served as Kor's personal guard for 15 years before becoming captain. There is no one more loyal, no one I trust more with my son's life." She fixed me with a penetrating stare. "And with yours, Willa. Your safety is paramount now." The acknowledgement surprised me. The Queen had always been cordial but distant, accepting my role without truly embracing it. This felt different, an acknowledgement of my importance to her son that went beyond mere duty. "When do we leave?" I asked, making my decision. 2 hours past midnight," she replied. "Pack only essentials, dress warmly. The mountain passes will be cold this time of year." She moved toward the door, then paused. "I've sent word to Kor, but the message may not reach him for days. Until then, you'll be on your own." After she left, I sat with Ash in the rocking chair, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The baby seemed to sense my anxiety, fussing more than usual. I forced myself to breathe deeply, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "It's going to be an adventure, little one," I said, keeping my voice light. "Just you and me and some friends going to see new places. Wouldn't that be nice?" Ash blinked up at me, his dark eyes serious and somehow knowing. For a moment I could almost imagine he understood the gravity of our situation. Though of course that was impossible. Still, there was something in his gaze that steadied me. It reminded me of what was at stake. The hours dragged on, painfully slowly. I packed a small bag with clothes for both Ash and myself, along with his favorite blanket, and the wooden rattle Mira had carved for him. My mother's pendant remained around my neck, a talisman of strength in uncertain times. Just before the appointed hour, a soft knock came at the door. Cowell entered, his weathered face grim. "It's time, Guardian," he said quietly. "The way is clear for now, but we must move quickly." I wrapped Ash in his warmest blanket, securing him against my chest in a sling that left my arms free. He whimpered briefly before settling, his breathing deep and even against my heart. Kael led me through darkened corridors I had never seen before, avoiding the main passages. 4 other guards waited at a small side gate, all betas, all with the same look of solemn determination. 3 days to the summer palace. If we make good time, Kael murmured as we slipped into the courtyard. The horses are waiting just beyond the lower garden. The night air was crisp with the approach of winter, the stars shining brightly in the cloudless sky. Our breath formed small clouds as we moved silently through the shadows, every sense alert for danger. I couldn't help but glance back at the castle I had called home for the past few months, wondering if I would ever see it again. We reached the horses without incident, their massive forms waiting patiently in the darkness. I hesitated, a new fear surfacing. I've never ridden before, I confessed to Kael, my voice tight with uncertainty. He nodded as if he'd anticipated this. "You'll ride with me," he said, his tone steady as he helped me mount before swinging up behind me. "Hold Ash secure against your chest." He instructed, his presence firm and reassuring. "I'll handle the horse." With Kael's solid form at my back, we set off at a careful trot, leaving the castle and its secrets behind. The other guards formed a protective circle around us, 2 ahead, 2 behind, ever watchful for any signs of pursuit or ambush. As the night deepened, we quickened our pace, following winding paths through forests and valleys I'd never seen before. Ash slept soundly in my arms, lulled by the steady rhythm of the horse and the comforting scent of me. Every time we paused to rest the horses or tend to Ash, I marveled at his resilience. Not even 4 months old, and already he was a fugitive, running from those who would use him for their own gain. Dawn broke with no sign of pursuit, painting the eastern sky in hues of pink and gold. Kael allowed us a brief stop to eat and tend to Ash. His experienced eyes were constantly scanning the surroundings. "We're making good time," he said, passing me a water skin. "If luck holds, we'll reach the mountain pass by nightfall." "And if we're followed?" I asked, voicing the fear that had gnawed at me all night. Kael's weathered face hardened. "Then we fight. These men are handpicked by the Queen for their loyalty and skill. They'll die before letting harm come to Ash or to you." His inclusion of me in their protection still felt strange, undeserved. I was just an Omega, nothing special, simply the one who had the right scent to soothe a royal baby. And yet, here were seasoned warriors, risking their lives for us both. We continued through the day, the temperature rising as we navigated increasingly rugged terrain. The forest began to thin, giving way to rocky slopes with sparse vegetation. As we ascended toward the foothills, Ash grew fussy, disturbed by the changing pressure and unfamiliar surroundings. "He needs to rest properly," I said to Kael as his cries grew more insistent. "And the horses, too." Kael nodded reluctantly. "There's a shepherd's hut ahead. We'll stop there briefly." The hut was abandoned for the season, a simple stone structure with a sagging roof and empty sheep pens. Still, it provided shelter from the biting wind that had begun to whip around the mountainside. While the guards secured the perimeter, I settled inside with Ash, nursing him with the goat's milk we had brought, changing his wrappings. "That's better, isn't it?" I murmured, rocking him gently. "Just a little rest, and then we'll be on our way again." He gazed up at me, one tiny hand reaching for my face. His touch was warm, trusting, and something fierce swelled inside me, a protectiveness that went deeper than anything I'd ever felt before. In the months we had spent together, he had become more than my charge. He was more than the heir I was duty-bound to guard. He had become mine in a way I couldn't explain, and as I had become his. "I won't let anyone hurt you," I promised softly, my heart swelling. "Not ever." A sudden commotion outside broke the moment. I heard shouts followed by the metallic ring of weapons being drawn. Clutching Ash close, I moved to the window, peering cautiously outside. Riders were approaching, at least a dozen, moving fast up the mountain path. Even from a distance, I could see they weren't wearing royal colors. Kael burst through the door, his face grim. We've been betrayed. He said the words, hitting me like a blow. Someone at the castle must have revealed our destination. Cold fear gripped me. What do we do? There's another path, Kyle replied, his voice low but determined. Steeper, more dangerous. But it might give us an advantage. He gestured toward the back of the hut. We need to move now before they cut off all escape routes. I quickly secured Ash in his sling, once more wrapping my cloak around us, both for warmth and concealment. Outside, 3 of our guards mounted quickly prepared to hold off the approaching riders. Kyle, myself, and 1 other guard would take the alternate route. May the moon guide your path, Kale said to the remaining guards, clasping forearms with each man in a warrior's farewell. They nodded grimly, drawing their weapons as they turned to face the oncoming threat. I realized with sickening clarity that they were riding to their deaths to buy us time. Kyle helped me onto his horse before mounting behind me. Keep your head down, he instructed. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, don't look back. We set off at a gallop, following the remaining guard up a nearly invisible path that snaked along the mountainside. Behind us, I heard shouts and the clash of steel against steel as our rear guard engaged the pursuers. The path ahead grew treacherous, narrow, and steep, with loose rocks that threatened to send our horses tumbling down into the ravine below. Ash remained remarkably calm, as if sensing the need for silence. Kale guided the horse expertly, one arm securely around my waist to keep me steady. We rode through the gathering dusk, the temperature dropping sharply as night began to fall. Stars started to twinkle in the darkening sky. Just as I thought we might have outrun our pursuers, an arrow whizzed past my ear, embedding itself in a tree ahead. They found us! Our remaining guard shouted quickly, wheeling his horse around. Keep going, Captain. Get them to safety. I'll delay them as long as I can, he added before charging back down the path toward the approaching danger. Kale cursed under his breath, but urged our horse onward, his voice tightening with urgency. The summer palace is less than a day's ride away, he said. If we can reach the high pass by dawn, we might lose them in the forest beyond. I nodded, too numb with cold and fear to speak. Ash had begun to whimper, sensing my distress, despite my attempts to stay calm. I stroked his back through the sling, humming softly to soothe him. As we crested a steep rise, Kyle suddenly stiffened behind me. Listen, he commanded. At first I heard nothing beyond the wind and our horses' labored breathing. Then it came a distant howl answered by another, and then another. Wolves. I asked, though I knew that wasn't quite right. The sound was similar, but deeper, more purposeful. Wolf shifters. From the north. Kale confirmed, his voice grim. Are they friends or enemies? Kale hesitated, his gaze sharpening. That depends on who sent them. The howls grew closer, echoing across the mountainside. Our horse snorted nervously, sensing the predators closing in. Kale urged it forward, but the path had narrowed dangerously, forcing us to slow our pace. There, Kale said, suddenly pointing ahead to a dense stand of pines. We can defend that position if necessary. And we had barely reached the trees when they appeared, massive forms, slipping out of the darkness surrounding us, in a loose circle. In their wolf forms, they were terrifying, larger than natural wolves, their intelligent eyes gleaming in the starlight. Kyle dismounted with smooth precision, helping me down before positioning himself protectively in front of us. Sword drawn, I held Ash tighter, feeling his tiny heart race against mine. The largest wolf, a silver-gray male with a scar across his muzzle, stepped forward slowly. As he neared, his form shimmered, bones cracking as he shifted into human form. A tall, powerfully built man stood before us, naked and unashamed in the cold night air. Captain Kyle, he acknowledged with a rumbling voice, a smile that never quite reached his eyes. It's been many years. Kale didn't lower his weapon. Garrett, I didn't expect to find northern shifters this far south. The man, called Garrett, smiled again, though it was cold. We received a message from Kor himself. At the mention of the Alpha King's name, hope flared within me. You've heard from him, I asked, my voice breathless. Is he well? Does he know about the attack on the castle? Garrett's gaze shifted from me to Ash, and his nostrils flared as he scented the air. The air, he murmured. And his guardian. Yes, Cor sent word 3 days ago. He's cutting through the eastern territories to reach the Summer Palace. He asked us to ensure you arrived safely. Garrett continued, his expression softening slightly as he looked at Ash. May I? Instinctively, I stepped back, shaking my head. I'm sorry, but I can't just... Willakale interrupted gently. The Northern Shifters are Cor's oldest allies. If he sent for them, they can be trusted. Still hesitant, I loosened the sling just enough for Garrett to see Ash's face. His expression transformed, warmth replacing the coldness of a warrior. He has his father's look, Garrett said, genuine respect in his voice. Strong. He will make a fine Alpha one day. He stepped back and turned to his pack with a commanding gesture. Form a perimeter. The heir and his guardian travel under northern protection now. As the shifters began to move into position, Garrett turned back to us. We'll escort you to the Summer Palace. Cor should arrive within days. For the first time since we left the castle, I felt the knot of fear inside me begin to loosen. We weren't alone anymore. Cor was coming. We would be safe. Thank you, I said, simply unable to express the depth of my gratitude. Garrett nodded, shifting back into wolf form with a fluid motion that still made me gasp in awe. Kyle helped me remount, and we continued our journey, now surrounded by a protective circle of massive wolves as dawn broke over the mountains. I caught my first glimpse of our destination, a stone structure nestled against the mountainside, smaller than the main castle, but still impressive in its isolation. The Summer Palace, our sanctuary. Ash stirred against me, waking with a soft sound. I adjusted the blanket around him, letting him see the golden light spreading across the valley below. Look, little one, I whispered. We made it. Your father is coming. Everything is going to be all right now. And for the first time since this journey began, I truly believed it myself.